Coming up on the 49ers Report, we'll get to the latest on Jimmy Garoppolo and the trade rumors surrounding him, maybe going to the Cleveland Browns or maybe the New York Jets, or maybe not. We'll get to what the experts are saying about Trey Lance after he dazzled with that long ball to Danny Gray in the preseason opener against the Green Bay Packers. Is Samuel Womack now going to be the starting nickel after Darqueze Dennard was released? And then we'll take your questions as part of one of our mailbags. First, though, want to begin with this. The Niners did make a roster move today. Yesterday, we talked about the 4 players that they released in order to trim that roster down to 85 before they parted ways to Minnesota for these joint practices this week against the Vikings. They have made another roster move to get down to the mandatory 85-man limit, letting go of Robert Nkemdiche, the former first-round pick out of Ole Miss, who has been a flat-out bust in his NFL career. He certainly did a couple of nice things throughout training camp to impress a lot of people at 6'4", 296. He's a really good athlete, but has battled injuries and inconsistent play throughout his NFL career. You thought, okay, maybe he can be a backup defensive tackle on this roster, but we know that San Francisco has one of the most loaded defensive lines in the National Football League, and because of that, Nkemdiche is out. He will not have an opportunity to crack this 53-man roster. From Nkemdiche, a former 49er, to Jimmy Garoppolo, who might soon be a former 49er. What's the latest around Garoppolo maybe getting traded to the Cleveland Browns? Bill Barnwell, a really respected NFL analyst for ESPN, was on Mina Kimes' podcast. And yes, they went deep into the analytics, which isn't always my thing. I look at analytics like you got to use them in some instances, but then others, some of the numbers are just ridiculous. But he did say something that I've continued to say and agree with, that it makes total sense for Jimmy Garoppolo to get traded to the Cleveland Browns. And he echoed a lot of the same things that I've said. Maybe Bill Barnwell tunes into the 49ers Report. Here's what he had to say to Mina Kimes when they were talking about Garoppolo. The Browns are the one team in the NFL who have the cap space to absorb Jimmy Garoppolo's contract without any other changes, and it makes total sense. The fit is very logical. The Browns run a very similar offense to what the Niners run with Kyle Shanahan under Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, and the cap fit makes a lot of sense. The salary is not an issue, and Jimmy Garoppolo has every reason to want to go to the Browns, where it's basically a one-year opportunity to prove yourself before hitting unrestricted free agency. And those are a lot of the same things that I've said about Garoppolo, right? Kevin Stefanski, Kyle Shanahan, they both like to lean on that ground game and go with that power running attack. And like the 49ers, the Cleveland Browns have a good offensive line. They have good skill position players. And because of that, Garoppolo won't be forced to be a quarterback who has to drop back 40, 50 times. If he has to do that, then some of his deficiencies and his weaknesses will become apparent. But if Garoppolo is on a really good team, and the Browns have a much better offensive line, by the way, as compared to the Niners, I'm just more so talking about the Browns and Niners having very good teams right now. That's where Garoppolo fits best. And as for Deshaun Watson and his suspension, nobody knows what's going to happen. And it all comes down to how long Watson is suspended. If it's longer than 6 games, which was appointed originally by Judge Sue Robinson, then I do think that Cleveland will have those conversations and maybe make a trade for Garoppolo, because you can't tell me and you can't convince me that they are comfortable with a really good roster that is primed to go to the playoffs, that they're going to move forward with Jacoby Brissett. So nobody knows what happens with Deshaun Watson when that decision comes down. Maybe that paves the way for Garoppolo to get sent to the Cleveland Browns. As for Garoppolo to New York to play for the Jets, looks as though that is not going to happen. We talked about this last weekend after the Packers game, because Zach Wilson went down with what originally looked like a very serious injury, underwent surgery today in California with the same doctor who performed the surgery for the ACL on Nick Bosa and a couple of other players. But the surgery went well for Zach Wilson, expected to be back at some point in the first month. And the Jets, it looks as though they're going to move forward with Joe Flacco and not make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I think a lot of that comes down to the price tag, because Garoppolo's base salary, $24+ million, but Rappaport pretty much confirming that the Jets no longer suitors for Jimmy G. With Jimmy Garoppolo available from the Niners, the Jets don't appear intent on making a move. They have confidence in Joe Flacco in the likely scenario where he starts until Zach Wilson is 100% ready. Now, I don't think that the Jets think that Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than Jimmy G. He's just a lot cheaper as compared to Jimmy Garoppolo. We're about to talk about Trey Lance, and then we'll answer some of your questions. First, though, if you want San Francisco to trade Garoppolo, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. If you don't want the Niners to trade him, I want you to comment why in the comment section right now. Quick tidbits on Trey Lance before we start answering your questions. The Trey Lance hype train. It continues to move forward with full steam. ESPN's Louis Riddick, who I think does a great job as an NFL analyst, said that Trey Lance has the ability to, quote, take this league by storm. Here's exactly what Riddick had to say about Lance. It's hard for me to stay composed about this young man. He represents the best of both worlds in terms of a guy who can create with his legs and pick up first downs, be that design quarterback runner, or a guy who can launch the ball downfield and threaten every blade of grass on the field. He continued by saying that defensive coordinators are scared of quarterbacks like this who offer that dual threat and the fact that Lance can complete any throw on the football field and has that deep throwing ability. And I think it's time for people to get pumped up about Lance. There are going to be struggles. There are going to be moments that are ugly. But in the blink of an eye, Trey Lance can turn that around and make this offense really, really explosive. And Lance has tantalizing ability and enormous potential. It's easy to see. And let's just take a look and remember what Lance has been able to do in a very small sample size. Last preseason, long ball to Trent Sherfield. Last year against the Texans, second to last week of the season, long ball to Deebo Samuel. First preseason game against the Packers this year, another deep throw to Danny Gray, 76 yards to the crib. The deep playability for Lance, it is there, and it can make this offense just go off with some fireworks. And I've been doing a lot of prep in the lead up to this upcoming season, and I think that this is a really interesting stat that points to the Niners offense maybe being more explosive this year with Trey Lance, but maybe less efficient without Jimmy Garoppolo. I tweeted this out. Be sure to give me a follow at Chase_Senior, by the way. But in the last 5 years, Jimmy G is first in the NFL among all quarterbacks in yards per attempt at 8.4. But this is fascinating. He is 42 out of 43 quarterbacks in air yards. So that goes to show you he doesn't throw the ball downfield like Trey Lance is able to do. There's also this. Last year, with this Niners offense, 6.8 yards after the catch per completion. With Trey Lance, it was 7.0, and the league average just north of 5. So that right there, very, very indicative of what this Niners offense could become in 2022 with Trey Lance leading the charge. Samuel Womack, the rising rookie. Is he going to be the starting nickel coming off that 2-interception performance against the Green Bay Packers? I think so. When the Niners had to trim that roster down to 85 players, they let go of Darqueze Dennard, who was first on their depth chart at that nickel role. But because they let him go, which was a surprise cut, that paves the way for Womack to start as a rookie. And the number that I continue to talk about with Womack at Toledo, and a big reason why, if you go back on the channel, I said that the Niners selected a stud nickel cornerback at the time, 53 career games at Toledo, 45 pass breakups. Not only did he get a bevy of experience at the college level, he is so active at making plays on the football. That's why I love the selection of Samuel Womack, and that's what the coaching staff has seen, and that's why right now he is the number one corner at that nickel position on this roster. After the preseason game against the Minnesota Vikings, I want all of you to join us for another live podcast on Callin. It's like Twitter Spaces, but even better. Download the app today by heading to chatsports.com/49ersCallin. We'll, of course, be doing a watch party against the Vikings, and then we'll continue to stay live for a post-game show in which we'll go on Callin, where you can call into the show, chatsports.com/49ersCallin. When you download the app, make sure you subscribe. With that, let's start answering some of your questions to round out this segment. Chua Lore, should the Niners be considered Trey Lance for MVP? So you're asking if Trey Lance could be the MVP this upcoming year. So, Chua, we got done talking about what Louis Riddick said about Trey Lance. He thinks that Lance is one of his dark horse MVP candidates. Now, a lot of things have to go right. But if Deebo has another big year, Brandon Ayuk breaks out, and George Kittle has a 1,000-yard season, and Ray-Ray McCloud, Jawan Jennings, Danny Gray, they end up performing well, and this ground game gets going, and San Francisco wins a bunch of games, then yeah, Trey Lance, if he puts up big numbers, can be a dark horse MVP candidate. I don't expect that to happen, though. 49er champ Roblox, who will take the wide receiver 3 role behind Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. It's actually a pretty stealth competition right now. Going into camp, it was Jawan Jennings' job to lose, but he struggled in camp. He's dropped passes seemingly every single day, and because of that, Ray McCloud is on his heels. We saw him catch that 39-yard dime from Nate Sudfeld after he just made the defender fall over like an Allen Iverson crossover back in the day, and Danny Gray had that 76-yard touchdown. So while Jawan Jennings gives you a bigger body in that slot at 6'3", and last year was great on 3rd and 4th downs, Ray McCloud and Danny Gray give the Niners more explosion. So it kind of depends on what this coaching staff wants, and maybe it comes down to the particular scenario during the game. Shane Kirshner, back watching the 49ers report. Thank you for your super chat a little bit earlier, my guy. With Daniel Brunskill getting injured, what do you think will happen with Donovan West? Does he become the backup and make the 53-man squad? I'm not sure. Maybe he's a practice squad guy. I think that's where he better slots as a practice squad guy to learn the ropes of the NFL and improve upon his game a little bit, because in training camp he's been a little bit shaky. As for who that backup center is going to be, I really have no idea right now. If Daniel Brunskill is going to be out for a little while, that injury timeline is certainly going to be important. Julian Rost, big supporter of what we do. Trey, second coming of Steve Young, that is my prediction. In terms of a dual-threat quarterback who was a pass-first guy who could also gash you with his legs, that's what Steve Young was, and that's why he's a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and that's why he had so much success. And Steve Young, can you imagine what he'd be able to do if he played in the league now at that dual threat spot? I mean, my goodness, he would be able to be just a big play threat week in and week out. But if Trey can have that dual threat ability, then I'm not going to say he's going to be Steve Young, but just think about the threat that poses toward opposing defenses. What I love about Trey, and honestly my favorite play for him against the Packers last week, it wasn't the 76-yard bomb to Danny Gray. Love the accuracy, no wobble on the throw, sensed the pressure, got rid of it quickly. He also knew that Gray was going to go up against the safety, so he knew that he had the mismatch there, was able to take advantage of it. My favorite play instead of that, though, was that 2nd and 8. When Lance dropped back, pocket collapsed, he climbed the pocket, looked to throw, saw that everybody was covered, and then decided to run for a little nice gain there. So that pocket awareness for Trey and the fact that he wants to pass before he runs is something that I think is important for his longevity for this football team. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for the latest Niners news and rumors, and so that you can get featured on some of our mailbags. Hit that red sub button down below or head to youtube.com/49erstv. Less than 100 people away from 61,000 subs. We're going to continue to grow right here on the 49ers Report.